Welcome for this session on GMAT Focus. You have been planning to take the GMAT. You might have had some sense of what the existing format is, but now you have, this thing that you have to take a new test called the GMAT Focus, and you have come here really because out there is a lot of noise and it can be very confusing. You would want someone to distill it and give it to you in a form that you can just look at and understand what does it mean for me. All right, so I'll just give a quick introduction about who am I, why am I here, why am I telling you this. Well, I've spent pretty much over 2 decades, teaching the GMAT. So you can imagine what really, I have kind of learned in the journey. Right. So sometimes it's just that a lot of this experience is from what is worked for the students. Right. So in some sense, I've been tracking the GMAT from the time it was a paper-based test. 98 is when it became computerized. For about 25 years, we had that same model, correct? But they did have some changes. For example, 2011, they introduced something called as integrated reasoning. Then later on, they reduced the number of questions. So there were always some kind of a cosmetic change that kept happening. But I think this is the first time when GMAT has gone ahead and made such a significant change that it's taken me, some time, we've been taking the test and looking at it from a test taker perspective, from a test setter perspective, trying to decipher what the GMAT Focus has to offer. And I've got that news. We got the rest of the webinar to kind of cover it. And what we believe and which is true for the GMAT and what we have realized is even so for the GMAT Focus is you have to understand that more and more it's about understanding what's going in your head. Think about it. What is the difference between, let's say, IAS, Civil Services Coaching and GMAT coaching? Right? So when you look at civil services coaching, there is a lot of things that you need to know, that you need to learn, right? You cannot solve a history paper by not studying. But here is the truth. On the GMAT, you actually don't have a lot of theory. In fact, we'll be looking at it. The GMAT Focus has now even further reduced it. The earlier GMAT anyways had very little theory, but whatever little theory you had, even that is taken away from you, right? And this therefore becomes important how you are able to address what is going inside your head. GMAT is a single player game, right? No coaching, no test prep can actually come and sit next to you on the test. So what we really have to do is we have to understand, look, this question is designed for a person to be solved in 2 minutes. Whether I can be that person or not is what really, is the core of GMAT. And that's really how our course also has been designed, right? I'll be talking about it as we go ahead. But the fact that we really are not here to teach you theory, you probably know all the theory that is required for you to do well. Then what else is GMAT Focus going to test us on? So I just wanted to introduce, so today's session, I'm also going to be joined by my team. So all of whatever I told you, it's again, it's a team effort. So I have a team. So we have Devmitra who handles Quant and data insights. We have Neeta who handles the verbal and also the verbal part of data insights. We'll be talking about data insights a little into the section. And Junaid, who manages the Quant and data insights, and Dipankar, again, managing verbal and data insights. So we'll probably get into kind of having a discussion later, but I also wanted to just kind of put that point, which is for us, really, this is what we do for a living, correct? So understanding the GMAT, deciphering it. So we have had a lot of fun going through GMAT Focus, and we have had a lot of discussion because a lot of what we incorporate in the course is really reverse engineering what the test is going to kind of, really challenge you on, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to share the insights that we have had over the last few weeks. November 7th is when the test went live. So from that, what we've been hearing, what we kind of know about the test. We also have had access to GMAT organization. So I personally met the chief psychometrician. So psychometrician is actually a job, right? These are the people who designed the GMAT paper, correct? So we actually have spoken, and whatever they kind of give, we also kind of take it from MBA.com. So from that, we have kind of put this. So first, what is the structure of the GMAT focus, right? What are the sections? For people who have been preparing to the old GMAT, specifically what is different in the GMAT Focus Edition. And what we will do is we will deep dive into each of the three sections: verbal, quant, and data insights, right? So we'll make sure we can get into that. And then we will talk a little bit about scoring and percentiles. I think it's a very important aspect for us to know when we are looking at it. And finally, what I'm going to do is I would like to keep as much time available to answer your questions. So we already have your emails that you have sent. So we will try to see how much of those questions we cover during the session, okay, for the next, half an hour to 45 minutes. And then what we can do is we can then get back to answering those questions on email, plus any questions that you may have at this point. So what's really changed? The big news is if you look at it at the outer level, okay, so you have this bit which is, I'm just going to, so we have this bit which is, you see a huge difference in the time, right? So in the first case, you have something, we had over 3 hours, right? But right now, it's been reduced to 2 hours, 15 minutes. The point being, has it really reduced? Has it really made a difference? So we'll be looking at it. It's not as easy as it sounds, okay? And I'll tell you the reason for that, okay? The reason for that is earlier, there were 4 sections, right? The current GMAT, which is also administered right now, which many of you are already preparing for, has 4 sections. But really, out of the 4 sections, 2 sections don't matter. What I mean by don't matter is, you need to score just enough to fly under the radar. You don't want to end up with a 1 on AWA, right? Because that means you don't even know how to write English, right? So you want to get a respectable 4.5, right? Or even if you look at IR like a 5, anything above the 50th percentile, these schools were not really looking at. They were concerned only about the 3-digit GMAT score. Now what has happened is you have a 3-digit GMAT score that is going to comprise of your scores in 3 sections. So it looks like a reduction from 4 to 3, but the catch is it's an increase of 1. Earlier, you had to worry only about 2 such sections. Now you have to worry about 3 sections. So what is the new section that has been added to quant and verbal is data insights. What is data insights? We are going to get into details. So when Junaid comes, he will double click and he'll kind of get into that. We are also now have this kind of point on sending the scores itself. If you notice, the scores end with a 5, right? So what you will see is, you will see scores like 205, 305, and it goes all the way till 805. The good part, and I'm going to talk about this in detail as it is available, but more or less, I think there are some changes, but some interesting changes, but we will also look at how do these change actually impact us from a test taker perspective, right? But it's significant changes. So we will try to double click and get into it. What is the basic structure of these 3 sections? You have one which is quantitative reasoning. You have one which is verbal, and the third they have introduced is data insights. Now, why have they done that change, right? Why is it that they have actually reduced this? Why are they bringing about a change? There are a couple of reasons, and as I said, my experience working with GMAC as an organization, I think they clearly see a couple of things happening, right? So the first thing that they saw happening was people or these schools getting fixated with scores, right? So 730, 740 started to have a very strong psychological anchoring bias, right? So people looked at a score and decided whether, you should even apply or not. That being said, there was another problem, which is also score inflation. So if you see the current GMAT, in a quant, for example, a 51, is still a 96, 97 percentile, but then when it goes to a 50, it gets to 85th percentile, and it goes to like a 74th percentile by the time you get to a Q49, right? So this also meant that it was getting harder and harder for them to differentiate people at the higher end of the quartile. What do I do if everybody is at a 90th percentile, correct? Within 90th percentile also, can I spread this a little bit more, right? And that is where they have kind of introduced now, really, if you look at it, prima facie, 45 minutes for about 20 odd questions gives you around 2 minutes or so per question, right? But what we will see is the nature of the questions can actually differ pretty widely from, quant to verbal to data insights. So the way we approach, for example, a pure context quant problem will be very different than the way I approach a reading comprehension passage to the way I approach a multi-source reasoning question in data insights, correct? So, though the questions are 21, 23, 20, what I'm just saying is the type of questions would be different, and we'll be seeing what kind of questions will be tested as we get into each of these slides. And the third reason that GMAT has, and presumably, it said it publicly, that one of the things that it's also trying to do is keep GMAT relevant to the modern world, correct? And one of the ways in which you get relevancy is if you say, okay, what really is happening in the real world, right? People who take the GMAT and end up scoring well are going to a B school. What does this consultant do therefore? What does this consultant do? This consultant is actually a guy who's very good with three things, right? He's very good with understanding, processing information, okay? Because with AI, with ChatGPT and all this, today content is being created at a very high rate. If you want to just read, all the content that is produced on a daily, daily level, you probably can't keep in touch. So how do I make sense of this information in the real world, right? So a lot of this happens to do with critical reading. What you do in verbal reasoning is actually going to be critical reading. And one of the reasons they might have kept sentence correction out is really, who needs grammar anymore when you have ChatGPT, right? By the way, I just wanted to know, curious, how many of you are using ChatGPT like on a daily basis to just clean up your, English and, like make this email better or make this kind of better, write a appraisal. I see that as a use case as well, right? Correct. So they are saying, yeah, why sentence correction? No, sentence correction is, so that's probably why they removed. And even if you see what is left, correct, and I'm very happy, by the way, I wanted to acknowledge those of you who are using it, right? Absolutely. I believe that ChatGPT is to literacy what the calculator was to numeracy, right? So it's stupid for you not to use it, right? So interesting use cases. The key over here is to look at studying for the GMAT, not as studying for an exam, but rather looking at it as a life skill. Critical reading is going to stay with you as a consultant. Why as a consultant? Even in a B school, when you are given that case study one day before and you are marked for class participation, right? It's going to put a lot of pressure on you. You are going to have to read, 12, 13 pages of a company's profile, challenges they face, this thing, so that the next day you can prepare. So If you look at reading comprehension, critical reasoning, it's really testing you on those skills, right? Uh, Math, right? And we're going to be coming into math, uh, quantitative. There is actually a change in GMAT focus, right? And it's a change for the better. And the change, and I don't want to steal the thunder of what's going to come later, but largely the change is you do not need to know too many formulas, too many this. Everything is a puzzle that can be solved by just using, logic. And that's really what is going to happen in the real world, right? You have to be, if you are a business leader, you need to be very nimble with numbers. Economics and finance are the vocabulary or the language of business. How can you keep numbers away, right? But these are not numbers that you need to like some trigonometry or some calculus or some fancy numbers. It's simple numbers that you are expected to kind of use on a day-to-day basis. And the third thing that they have started is this section on data insights. And we again, get into it. But data literacy is a super critical skill in the 21st century, right? I mean, as we see, as I said, our ability to understand data, because any tool today can do the analysis for you, right? So any tool can, help you do the analysis for you. But in reality, the fact is that, as we make decisions, we have to start using numbers. So my submission to you is, don't look at studying for the GMAT just as a test, right? Think of what you want to aspire to be, right, in your post-MBA career. And ask yourself, what are the kind of skills that I need to have at that point? And think of preparing for the GMAT focus more as a step in that direction, right? So that's what I would probably make you want to think about. So what's new? I'm going to pick what are the top things that we need to know. So what you see over here is going to be your section selection order. So now if you see, there are 6 options possible. If you work it out, it's there are 3 and it can appear in any order. So you can start with quant as first, second, third, start with verbal as first, second, third, start with data insights as first, second, and third. One other change that has happened is that there is going to be one break of 10 minutes, which can be taken once between any 2 sections, right? So you can take it after the first section, or you can take the break after the second section, right? There have been a lot of speculation on what works best, but really there is a lot of permutation combination, and it really depends on each individual student. And one thing that I want you to think about is that none of the 6 is a favorite, right? You can't say, okay, people who do well are the people who pick DI first, or people who took quant first. Pretty much, if you see the actual score, you will see that these 6 types will have a pretty uniform distribution, right? Earlier, in fact, I'll tell you, we had AWA, IR, then quant verbal. That got the least preference. People wanted to start either with quant or verbal. So there were really 2 choices. But here we actually have multiple choices. But I think this is something that usually once we get to the point of taking the test, we want to consider, right? So we don't want to worry about it now. But at some point, this is a strategy that we need to keep in mind. So what we do typically at Crackverbal when we work with students is we try to give them some experiments, right? So you can try when you're doing your practice test, it's always good to try some variations, right? But typically what happens is people who are good at quant want to start with verbal. People who are good at verbal want to start with quant. So you may have combinations where I go through quant. If I'm a verbal student, I want to go through quant, then maybe take a break and then, get to DI insights, data insights, and verbal. So those are things that we can consider as we go forward, right? This interesting feature called Bookmark review that has appeared, correct? So now here is the hypothesis, right? Now, how can they allow you to change three questions and your final score not get impacted. If you understand the way the adaptive algorithm works, what they are saying is that your subsequent question would be, based on your performance of the previous question. Therefore, how do you explain, right? Well, when this question was posed, as I mentioned, to the chief psychometrician, one of the responses that we got was that eventually what they did this testing and they figured out that the eventual trajectory of a person did not change if he got three questions right or wrong, which means a person scoring, let's say, 80th percentile, right? Three questions did not have a severe statistical impact on the final performance. Okay, so one of the things that students had was GMAT doesn't allow us time to mark and kind of come back, right? I have to answer it. So it also produces a lot of stress, right? So when GMAT looks at it, it looks at it from a test experience perspective. How is it for the test taker? Am I making the job easier? So when they do that, they want to give that allowance. It's like when you go for shopping, sometimes you say, "Isko baaju mein rakho, I'll go back, check something and come back." So it gives you that feeling of, satisfaction that, okay, I can come back to this question. So I think that's another reason why they introduced it. So what really happens is you can, for every question, there will be a button that is given to you for you to mark that as a question that you want to bookmark it for review. Once you're done with all the questions, you will not see this before you have completed your section. Once you have completed your section, you will see this screen, the one that you see on the top, the questions that you have bookmarked. You go click on it, and once you click on it, you basically will be able to go to that question, and in that question you will be able to change the response. So as you say, if you change the response, by the way, if anyone can just respond if the voice is coming okay. My hypothesis is, let's say your eventual score is 625 to 635, correct? If you make these three questions right, let's say previously there were three questions were wrong, you would have gotten 625, abhi you will get 635. So within the range, you may get at the higher end of the spectrum if you get the questions right. But your range is already fixed. You get it? That three question is not going to make a difference to your thing. And I think when we get into data insights, we also see why there is a very strong use case for GMAT to introduce this feature. I don't think this has been introduced for verbal or quant, but it's actually been introduced for data insights, where if you see the MSR, that is one of the strategies where we think that review and edit will actually kind of come into play. So good news is that they also have now given you 48 hours after the test scores to send the scores to. So just to give you a sense, the current GMAT, what happens is we have to pick the schools before the test starts, and many a times what happens is we don't really know how the test is going to go, and based on it we want to kind of think and then utilize this feature. So this was something that a lot of students have been asking, and I think GMAT themselves understood that it's not very user friendly. So in order to make it more user friendly, because see, GMAT is also now competing with GRE, you have to understand, right? So from a college perspective, they want to make it as easy for you to send to colleges so that more colleges start accepting, or rather start receiving GMAT scores from students. All Crackverbal students, just on that note, of course, we'll be working with you before your GMAT also, but once your GMAT happens, based on the score, we will be advising, taking, what are your points, what are your considerations, we will be advising you on what these 5 schools would be, right? But of course, it depends on your school. Yeah, so one other thing that they have also introduced is earlier the ESR was paid. So what is ESR? ESR is Enhanced Score Report. Enhanced Score Report tells me how I performed on the test, so that if I were to retake it, I can improve based on the feedback. Firstly, the ESR was not terribly useful, right? The current one Dipankar will get into it a little later, seems to have a lot of interesting data points. So that's good. And, GMAT finally realized that, look, I cannot be giving people a test and then charge money to explain how the test score works. So they have introduced this ESR as a part of the test course itself. So that's kind of, I said 48 hours. I'm not sure if I got that this. So 48 hours, so which is up to 2 days to select the test. Earlier, which is the GMAT that we had, you had to select it at the point of the test itself, right? So that's where you have it. So we'll get into ESR, but ESR is a very, very interesting. See, a lot of data that we have picked up and what we are presenting is also, we are constantly trying to reverse engineer the GMAT, right? That's our job, right? We are not here to teach you English, maths, or in fact, for retakers, we, sit, and the entire plan is based on what the ESR report shows. So I think this is definitely great news. Though you don't want to think about retaking the GMAT, it's like a root canal operation. You want to do it once, you want to do it right, and you want to get it out of the way. But always good to know. And I'll like to start by inviting Neeta to kind of throw light on what is your feeling on verbal, what is it that we have seen so far?
Hi everyone, very interesting information here about GMAT Focus, far more than we get from the regular websites that you have online. I today like to very briefly talk about the verbal section. What is it that we need to know? What are the skills that we need to have? Let's talk about the number of questions. In the present GMAT, we have 36 questions and that's come up to 23 now. And you have 45 minutes for these 23 questions. So a lot of people feel, oh wow, now I have, there are just 23 questions and I have 45 minutes. But as Arun mentioned a while back, is that really more time that we have? That's something that, we all need to consider. Is it really more time after all? But we now have 23 questions. The advantage is there are just 2 question types for us to deal with. As Arun mentioned, the theory that we had, there was a lot of grammar that we had. Although there wasn't too much grammar, there was a certain amount of grammar that you were expected to know. That is not there anymore. Now we have reading comprehension and critical reasoning, and these are life skills. So tomorrow when you go on to do your MBA studies, or even after your MBA, you must know how to read a passage or some data given to you and figure out what is the important information in this data. And if there are any questions that need to be asked or any doubts that anybody has about this information, you need to know where to go to get that information. This is a life skill. Same goes for critical reasoning. Critical reasoning questions expect you to fall back on critical thinking, critical reading. When you read any critical reasoning question, you have to be able to analyze what is the information being given, and you have to be able to figure out what is expected of me based on the information given. So there are just 2 types of questions, and it is very, very clearly focused on helping you develop the skills that you will need, be it your MBA studies or even after. Where time is concerned, we just have 45 minutes right now. So you need to have, let's say, approximately 6 to 8 minutes per passage. You can get anywhere from 3 to 4 passages. Normally what we've seen so far is there are 3 passages. If you get the 4th one, it usually means it's an experimental passage. But that aside, even if you get about 4 passages, you have anywhere between 6 to 8 minutes per passage. Arun, would you like to throw some light on the time that the students need to invest where the entire verbal section is concerned?
I think, the way we would probably look at is CR and RC being 2 separate buckets, right? And why we are saying this as because CR as a unit will take only 2 minutes, correct? But if you look at RC, I cannot go with a per question approach. I have to go with a per passage approach, right? So from what we understand is that, the GMAT focus, though it's very early data, but, the passages are longer. Our kind of thing on this is, any passage, any length, there is a way to read it properly, correct? So the strategy to read it is through what we teach called skimming, right? So if you do skimming properly, right? You don't need to worry about the length, which means each passage we have around 6 to 8 minutes to solve. Whether you have 3 or 4 passages, doesn't matter, you have 6 to 8 minutes, which doesn't mean that you have 8 minutes for all the passages. Correct? If you end up spending 8 minutes on the 4 passages that you get, you may end up getting 8 into 4, 32 minutes out of the available 45 minutes, right? In just doing those 4 passages. It means if I do one passage for 8 minutes, I have to compensate by doing another passage in sub 6 minutes. Correct? So the range is 6 to 8, right? So otherwise you will end up into time trouble. And that is the thing about RC, right? That thing is RC can lead you to this potential time. CR will not bother you. See, CR, instead of 2 minutes, you can take 3 minutes. But RC as a group, when you get like 3 RCs, each of the RC, if it leaks out a couple of minutes, it may end up, taking more into your time. I see a lot of questions coming up over here. Junaid, you have actually put hosts and panelists while responding. How many questions per passage? 3 to 4 questions per passage. That is not changed from the previous one, right? Agrim has got it right. 3 to 4 questions. Is there any, Zenith, is there any negative marking? The whole algorithm works in such a way that every time you make a mistake, it is taken into account. Now, is it taken into account like the way we have in CAD that -1/4? No. Or -1/3? No. It is taken into account in a different way. It is an algorithm that will define your final score. So I don't want to get too much into the algorithm itself, but that will RCs be the same as the classic GMAT? So Vikat, at this point, we do not see any change to the approach in verbal, right? So we do not see any approach. You can bookmark as many questions as you want, but you can edit only 3 questions. We'll be showing all of this as we go ahead, David.
Yes.
Just allow us a few more.
We'll talk about the scoring in a bit. But the point I wanted to make is that the time that we have is fairly limited. So the skills that we use while we answer the questions, while we tackle the exam, is something that we need to really refine. We need to make sure, since we have only 2 question types that we have to deal with in the verbal section, we need to be sure that we know how to skim, we know how to read the passage the way it needs to be read. It is exactly like it was the passages and the question types are similar to what we had in the class in GMAT. But now we need to work a little smarter. We need to know how to critically think as we look at our arguments, and we need to know how is it that we need to tackle the passages such that we can manage to finish the entire reading comprehension and the questions in the given amount of time. So what we're going to be working on is helping you develop these skills. And we talk about how it is that we need to skim, what we need to focus on. This is what we mainly tend to focus on in the course itself. So in the end, it's all about scores. And let's just have a quick look at the scores. Let's not get into a great amount of detail. What we can see here is right now, to answer your question, Dave, it ranges from 60 up to a 90. So once upon a time, yes, the raw score was 51, but now that has changed slightly. The people at MBA.com have even told us that the entire algorithm itself has been tweaked to a certain extent. How does this information help us? This is just a table for us to look at, but how is it that this information can help us where our prep is concerned? When all of you have done a certain amount of prep and you're all ready to take your mock test, you know you need to try and hit approximately an 80-ish or so to hit the at least a 70 percentile that you're looking. So the percentiles, yes, these numbers keep changing the more data that we get, but how am I going to change my prep according to this information? All we can do is try and make sure that we are hitting about an 80 or an 80 to get to a fairly good percentile, and then work from there onwards. So let's not worry too much about the percentile and numbers. For example, this screen over here you can see a comparison. What we had earlier on was maximum was 51, and now you can see it's from 60 on to a 90. the way the scoring, the raw scoring is done has changed slightly. But what we need to maintain is that we want to hit a percentile that helps us get to a good score. So what we could, Arun, is that something that I can say when we try to hit a raw score of 80 or 83 or so, this is something that at least to start with, that's where they can aim for?
Correct, because I think what is the constant over here is the test taking population. See, human intelligence has not changed, right? So the people taking the GMAT, they come with same skill sets. So what was considered, especially in verbal, where there is really no new, different thing, it's only sentence correction moving out. What I see is the same skills that you required for a 40-42 in verbal are going to be the skills that you require at, let's say, 85-86 in verbal, the new scale.
Absolutely. So all in all, what we can see is that in the end, even in the verbal section, it's not about testing how good your English is. It never was, and it still continues to be the same. What they are testing is, are you somebody who can handle large chunks of text? Are you somebody who can figure out from the information that you got, what is it that matters? Can you take the information presented to you and critically analyze what has been given to you? All skills that you need in your MBA studies and life after your MBA. So when we are preparing for the verbal section of the GMAT, our focus needs to be to hone these skills, to bring ourselves to a place where we can make the best of the information given to us to answer the questions that have been presented. So this is just a brief look at what the verbal section is, what is it that is expected of you. Are there any specific questions that you'd like to ask me about verbal before we go on to find out more about the Quant section? Or of course, we can always, if you think of questions by the end of the session, we can look at it there. Yes, Himanshu, something you wanted to ask?
So Neeta, my suggestion is, let's do this. Let's maybe have people ask the questions, in this. So how to maximize score in verbal is a fairly complex question.
Yes.
So let me see if there is anything that our questions in various sections different from.
So where the verbal is concerned, it's not very different. You have, now sentence correction is completely off. So you have approximately, I'm going to say approximately the same-ish number of questions in the verbal section. When we look at Quant, we look at that also. But for now, where the verbal section is concerned, it's not very much different, except that sentence correction is not there. That's pretty much about it. Himanshu, when you're saying that the test is more inclined towards data and numbers, data is also something that's being presented in the verbal section, right? Critical reasoning is giving you data, reading comprehension is giving you data. So in that sense, yes, the GMAT is testing how do you handle data, how do you handle numbers, and they're just doing it across 3 sections. That's pretty much what is happening.
I'll just take this one thing that Shaishav had. So does sentence correction provide a breather? The answer is absolutely correct. So what happens is that sentence correction was one of those things that you could just knock out of the ballpark in 60 seconds. There were questions, right? You could solve in 90 seconds. Moment you figure out modifier issue, tuck, 3 goes off, last 2, second issue goes off, you get the answer. That gave you some confidence. That also gave you that, kind of push that, okay, if I'm like falling behind on time, 2-3 sentence correction questions can help me make up. Whereas right now with CR and RC being the only 2 things, and both CR and RC, you understand, are time consuming, correct? So you don't have that leeway. According to me, that's definitely one thing.
So when it comes to Quant, my name is Devamitra. I'm into Quant and data insights. And when it comes to Quant, you see what I've written, something written here. GMAT Focus Quant is less daunting but smarter. Let's talk about why is it less daunting. Earlier, as compared to the older GMAT, the legacy format, we had PS, which is problem solving with 5 answer choice questions, and we had data sufficiency questions where you had to reason a lot. So basically, you were shifting mental gears. PS, DS, you're trying to figure out a unique answer. Sometimes you're trying to reason out on a yes, no kind of a question. But now, unlike that, it's less daunting because you just have PS. Mentally, you are just trying to solve one kind of problem. And you're going to do better when you do one kind of thing. Your speed or momentum increases faster. So that makes it less daunting. That's point number one. Point number two, already pointed out by most of you, few of you here, no more geometry. Not just geometry, no more geometry, no more concepts of, crazy concepts of a lot of complex concepts which used to be taught. GMAT Focus, with the PS questions, we just have two categories. And before I touch upon that, let me also tell you there used to be 31 questions earlier. Now we have 21 questions, and average time is 2 minutes 8 seconds with total duration of 45 minutes, which implies every single question that you obtain on GMAT Focus is doable in 2 minutes or maybe even under 2 minutes. It all depends on the skill upgrades. So this area, you're going to have fun when you start thinking differently and not just go have a mindset of solving problem, but at the same time, when you're on practice, try to analyze a lot on the questions. The kind of questions you would get would largely be pure and real context. Now, what is that? When you get questions around questions like, say, for example, any question that is, you get a question like this, 3 to the power minus 2, question that deals with a number like this. Your basic understanding of the fact that 3 to the power minus 2 is 1 by 3 to the power 2 is what is needed in order to solve a pure context-based question. Whereas when you're dealing with a real-life word problem, A goes to B at the rate of 50 miles per hour, B goes to C, you're already visualizing, you don't need any kind of fundamental concept or any kind of, math knowledge that ways. You just need pure logic in order to be able to solve such questions. So those questions, largely word problems, should form around 50% of those questions, 50% of the quant questions. In terms of the skills that you need, that's the entire game on GMAT Focus quant part is skills and only skills. So say, for example, you get a question like X is a positive integer. A problem solving question says X is a positive integer. If you're conceptually very, very strong, what happens is you can figure out that, okay, in this set of numbers, 0 definitely doesn't count it. 0 is neither positive nor negative. But if you don't have that solid grip, then it's going to be a problem. You land in the trap choice. So having basic understanding on numbers is key skill number one. Second, when you're dealing with word problems, reading, processing data, so read it slowly. Even for this question, X is a positive integer, read it once. Don't go to read it multiple times, because that way you're going to add cognitive load. X is a positive integer. I don't know why this is not writing. Yeah, no problem. Happens. When you read it slowly, you comprehend it, process it, you end up with the information that now X can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 3. You are able to rule out 0 when you are with 1, aligned with 1, aligned with 2, aligned with 3 to create the inference of the set of numbers that X can have. So what I'm trying to say is, when you start acquiring skills, the result of accuracy is a consequence. So don't run behind just, I have to get these questions right. No, do the pre-work before it. What all skills you need in order to get to that accuracy? So analyze more quant questions. Here's a question in terms of arithmetics and algebra. Are you seeing, wait a second, are you seeing a change? Are there more sets, probability, coordinate geometry, or there are more traps? Traps, GMAT or GMAT Focus cannot live without traps. They will place you in traps. That's the USP of these questions. In terms of arithmetic algebra, all your questions are under arithmetic algebra, largely if you look at MA.com. Sets, yes, you do get questions of sets, of tables, you do get questions on probability counting, but all of those questions also can be solved with logic. Yes, Ravi, inequalities, yes, but not too complex that way in terms of concepts. Very fundamental aspects of inequalities will be tested. Not too much as we have understood. Largely, it's word problems and number properties based questions. Coordinate and 3D geometry, no 3D. Coordinate is to be treated not like geometry questions, they are equation based questions. So treat them like equations and a part of algebra, not a separate coordinate geometry segment. No trigonometry was never ever there. No trigonometry. Even on the older legacy format, there was no trigonometry. It used to be more around basic concepts of triangles, etc., which is cut out. Yes, POMCOM probability questions do come under, the umbrella which you're looking for in terms, we do get questions. What do you mean by one umbrella, by the way?
If you could just maybe, try to answer Ahmed's question in a different way. I'm not sure what the exact intent is, but so what has happened is that if you look at permutation combination, we tend to think of it as this whole n factorial, n minus r factorial kind of thing, right? What GMAT is really expecting is that you are nimble in the way you are thinking about it. Let me give you an example. Let us say you have 5 pair of white socks, 3 pair of blue socks, and 1 pair of red socks, correct? So you can take any number, right? Let me just kind of make it simpler for you. Let's say that there are 5 pair of white socks, 5 pair of black socks, okay? 5 means 10 black socks, 10 white socks, okay? Total 20. What is the minimum number of socks you need to pick in order to ensure you have a pair of the same color? That if you think about it in terms of counting and logic, you will realize that a lot of questions you would be able to figure out. They are not wanting any theoretical knowledge that is required. In fact, some of them have even said they have had the actual definitions, like, what is, so they have given a harmonic mean is this. So according to that, so they don't even expect that amount of external knowledge. Some amount of mean, median, mode, I think that knowledge is required, but not too much. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just to wrap this up, this part. It is less daunting now with no geometry as such. It is less daunting now with only PS questions, which you have to take it in one go. It is smarter because even MBA.com says that pacing is the key, and that can happen when your skills are at place. So try focusing on skill upgrades. Pacing will be an eventuality of it. Okay? I'm going to move ahead from here. Any questions so far? A lot of you marked answer B, and some of you marked answer option C, 10 cents. So if you're already able to think answer option B, you're probably on the right track of thinking. Because if you think about it, all you have to do is the sum total of the hammer and nail is equal to 110 cents. Here's the hammer, here's the nail, and the sum total is 110 cents. I also know that the hammer costs $1 more than the nail. $1 is 100 cents. So I can replace H with the n plus 100 and create an equation which can help me solve for it. So 2n being equal to 10, n has to be equal to 5 cents. For those who immediately marked answer option C, there's a, human brain works in a certain way. You're pre-filled with information, you're working on autopilot mode, and you chose an answer which you, as an obvious answer, you mark answer option C, and that's where the GMAT focus traps would lie. So when you read a question, process it slowly, figure out what is the connect between the different variables if you're using variables, and then go ahead and mark and operate as the last and the final step. So utilizing that pause, that stillness to think through is of immense advantage on the GMAT focus questions of Quant. All right. And these are the strategies we're going to teach you. We're going to help you break down a complex question into something very, very simple and translate it into mathematical sentences like this quickly. Utilize strategies to, 5 answer choice questions. When you have 5 answer choice, it's so much more easier. One of this is correct. It's right there before you. One of the correct answer is right there before you. We could go ahead, use elimination as a strategy. So all of this, when you start learning as you prepare, will help you to cut down on the time. And this is what skill improvement is all about, right? Moving on from here, I'm assuming that all of you got a hang of what I'm trying to convey here. It's all about logic and strategies. It's not too much around math. Moving on from here. On the GMAT focus, I'm going to zoom this part a little. On the GMAT focus part of Quant, look at this part. You see, the 81th, not 81, yeah, this score range. At this score range, when you start eyeballing this part, you have to improve on your skill levels in order to read, process, eliminate, then finally operate and get to an answer. So it's not too much around math, it's more around logic, just tying it back with what we started the entire introduction of Quant with. And if you look at the older version of the GMAT and the new version of GMAT, I'll show you something interesting. In the older version, anyone with an 85 percentile, somebody with a 88 percentile, somebody with a 91 percentile, or somebody with a 95 percentile, all of them represented Quant 50. But on the new GMAT focus, this is a different set of scores. So basically GMAT Focus is very sensitive in terms of your accuracy. Once you start marking it correctly, you start, if you make any error, the algorithm will behave in a certain way as compared to the previous older legacy format of the GMAT. So try improving on accuracy and timing with a good amount of solid 3 months of preparation. I'd like to hand over this part to Junaid from here for data insights with 3 concluding points. The first being, on the GMAT Quant part of it, always try to use, build up on key skill number 1, build up on your fundamental knowledge. Key skill number 2 would be use real GMAT questions, OG questions, official guide questions. And key skill number 3, don't do too many questions. It's a large don't. Every day, less questions, more and more of quality analysis. That's what you should be looking for.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Junaid here. And thank you, DM. Thank you, Nita. And thank you, Arun. Right? I mean, specifically, thanks to Nita and, Dev Mitra for walking us through the quant and the verbal section, right? Because that's something very important for you to know before you get into the data insight section. Right? I mean, I'm pretty sure most of you are slightly excited, or I mean, some might be a little bit excited to know more about data insight than quant and the verbal, because data insight is something very new to the GMAT Focus, right? So that's a valid thing, right? I mean, of course, if I am a student, I will also be interested to know more about data insights than quant or verbal if you have already prepared for GMAT. That's true, right? Let's see what I have, what I have for you. And before I do that, just quickly tell me, right, what you currently know about the data insight section, so that I can build upon what you do not put. So quickly, whatever you can, you can think of. Okay, this is what I know about, data insight section. This is what I know about, this concept. This is what it's tested. All of it. Not scoring. Okay, very nice. Somebody have already texted a very big text. To the best of my understanding, the old GMAT did not have an adaptive algorithm in IR. Now with DI being a score contributing section, are we seeing difficulty levels and adaptive or there in general previous than IR? So it's more like a question or yours, I don't know. But yes, true. One fact is that IR was not a part of the scoring in the first, in the old GMAT. Now, yes, data insights is majority what you have learned in IR section. But not everything what you have learned in IR is the same as data insights, right? Data imputation, similar like CAT, no. Maybe the skills required could be similar, but the question type are different. Similar to IR, majority, like I said, of the subtopics that remain same between formats within each section is the type of question changing in RC main. Okay, I think it's more to the verbal, right? Towards the end we'll answer. Somebody have answered IR plus DS. Wonderful. That's pretty much sums it up. DS plus IR, DI pretty much sums it up. Perfect. Thank you so much for your answers, right? I mean, see, data insights is not something, if you have already prepared for GMAT, it's not something very new. Okay. It was there, but nobody gave attention to it, right? It was there, okay, so, I'm more interested in, doing the quant and the verbal because that's what contributed to the final score. IR though secondary is what most of the students who are taking the old GMAT had the, perception, right? But of course that changes now because data insight is equally weighting towards your final score, right? So let's take a quick look at how many questions are there and what else I can add as far as the data insights are concerned, right? So of course there are 20 questions. One you could see is little bit lesser number of questions comparatively quant and verbal. So what can I interpret? 20 questions, comparatively the number of questions are lesser from quant and verbal, means what can we interpret here? Is it is it questions going to take a little bit more time than the quant and the verbal sections? Can we interpret that way? What does it interpret, right? Again, if you know that it's going to take a little bit more time, you know that the questions are going to be slightly data heavy. As the section says here, it's a data insights, right? You are going to get text data, numbers data, tabular format, graph, all of it you're going to see here. And of course, your skills on how you interpret the data matters most. So that means that your RC skills going to come and help you here as well. Your CR skills going to come and help you here as well because it's logical. And of course, the number skills which you learned in your quant section is going to come and help you here as well because how good that your numbers is going to determine that, right? So I think it will even out. MSR will have almost three 3 parts in each question. In all, I think it will even out. Kind of, yes, perfect analogy. Like that's what I want to also touch upon, right? Perfect analogy, right? So first, there are 5 question types in your data insights, right? Data sufficiency, 2-part analysis, graphical interpretation, table analysis, multi-source reasoning. So one thing so far with the available data across with the official test, right? So roughly you can expect about 30% to 40% of questions data sufficiency, which I would say 6 to 8 questions, right? So and 2-part analysis again 20% to 30% of question, which is about 4 to 6 questions. Graphical interpretation anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 4 questions. Table analysis again, anywhere between 2 and 3 questions. Multi-source reasoning, generally you'll get 3, or let's say you have a good day, maybe you get a 2 or 3. Why I said good day, I'll talk about that later. But yes, these are the 5 question types you are going to get in the data insight section. And for those who have already prepared for GMAT, just to add you little more details on that, you can divide your data insight section like this. That is, you prepared for your quant data sufficiency. Now, like Devamitra mentioned, now you do not have to too much think about different question types in quant, because data insights has been pulled out of it and has been put it under data insight section. So earlier, if you are prepared for GMAT, the old quant data sufficiency plus the IR section, the question types, what contributes to the data insight section. But what are the other things what in the old GMAT was not what's not there, what is there in the data insight section is, as somebody mentioned, IR section earlier was linear. Here it is adaptive. Data insight section is adaptive, like your quant and verbal section. So you are answering to the first set of questions, or the current question will definitely impact the next set of questions. Now somebody asked, is it data insights is getting harder? You see, earlier IR section was linear. All the 12 questions, IR, if anybody don't know, earlier old GMAT has an IR section which had 12 parts of questions, right? So all of them are linear. It is pretty much defined before you start the section itself what are the 12 questions you are going to get in the old GMAT. But now here it is not the same, right? So it's going to get adaptive, right? So that means the section, the questions you are going to see is going to be comparatively harder than what you have seen in the IR section earlier. Okay, so that way it's going to be harder. Again, somebody asks, I'm going to get harder question in data insights. It depends. If you have done really well, definitely you're going to get a hard question, right? Particularly as somebody pointed out, multi-source reasoning is going to take a quite better chunk of your time while you are dealing with the question in the data insights. What is multi-source reasoning? You have multiple tabs. You will have a data which is presented in text format or table format, all of this inclusive in one question type, and you have to analyze the different tabs certain times for single question to answer it. Okay, so that's going to be quite challenging to do under 2 minutes or 3 minutes, right? Roughly any RC question, if you are interpreting a RC passage, what do you think roughly how much time, right, to solve not a RC question? I'm just simply asking RC passage to interpret and quickly skim and scan and try to understand what is the author or what is the passage talks about. How much it takes? 6 to 8 minutes. Wonderful, right? 6 to 8 minutes is what roughly it takes. You can consider a similar amount of time spending over here to understand the data, and of course, right, another minute or something to solve the question as well. On an average, you can spend around 7 to 6 minutes to understand the data itself. Now that tells you how the MSR would be data heavy. Okay, so MSR going to be data heavy, no doubt about it. But what is the strategy as far as the MSR? How as a team we are going to how we approach as a team, and what we tell to our students also. I'm going to talk about it a little later. But let's take a quick look at average time per question. As you could see, if I have to just simply do the math, right, 45 minutes, 20 questions, it will give you 2.25 minutes, which is 2 minutes 15 seconds. But certainly I'm pretty much sure everyone understands that it is not the way you can solve, right? Then how do we approach it then, right? Is it we approach it question by question? Definitely not. You always keep a small blocks, right, to understand whether you are going in the right direction as far as the timings are concerned. But more importantly, since there are 5 different question types, there are no other section has this many different question types, right? Quant has only 5 answer choices, right? Verbal, again 5 answer choices. Of course, the concept-wise reading and critical reasoning, right? Slightly different. Critical reasoning has a lesser words to read, right? But RC, of course, more dense data. but the question wise 5 answer choices, right? But you see here in your data insights, you have 5 question types, and all 5 question types are slightly unique, little bit different how they are presented itself. Okay, so you have to first understand, you have to learn data insights through understanding the question types only. Okay, so when I'm saying understanding the question type, data sufficiency, those who are already prepared for quant will know it. Now here, what the best thing GMAT has done is this data sufficiency. They made it more logic based. They removed anything which is related to quant. Anyone have prepared for quant data sufficiency earlier? So tell me, what would be the hardest data sufficiency question you would get under a GMAT, right? The old GMAT, right? Hardest concept. This concept I always hated it in the data sufficiency. So inequality DS is a very challenging thing. As somebody mentioned, number properties, there is no more reminder or any math based question you are going to get under data sufficiency. Okay, let me be clear about it, right? No more math based question. When I'm saying math based question, the question are not going to expect you to know what is the how to calculate a total factors, how to know the number of factors of a given number. All of it are gone in data sufficiency, right? Reminders question, very popular question, data sufficiency, which is definitely not a part of now data insights. Okay, so this is going to be purely logical. Word problem still going to be there, right? That you can't change it. Word problems going to be there, but word problems, one thing I can tell you is no X, Y, and Z. Okay, no X, Y, and Z. They are not going to say, Arun had X chocolates. Beth has Y chocolates. That X, Y, and Z is ruled out. Okay, that is going to be tested in your quant section, not in your data sufficiency section, right? Not in your data insights under data sufficiency. Okay, so that much you be clear with, right? So you have to develop a strategy to tackle data insights using the question type wise. When I'm saying tackle it, is data sufficiency is relatively easier because the lesser data will be provided here. You will be maximum analyzing 2 statements, right? And there will be little bit more data in the actual question step, right? Little bit of more data. So that's maximum the data you're going to see, right? The data is going to be less dense comparatively other 4 question types, right? So you see, you spend lesser time in data sufficiency, that way you will be able to manage time in the rest of the question types. My bet, any harder question, you should not take more than 90 seconds, right? Maximum try to tackle it under 90 seconds. That's the best thing to tackle a data sufficiency. That's the best way you can manage the entire section. Okay. Now, what it does when you are doing data sufficiency under less than 90 seconds, it helps you manage your time better in other question types. In fact, I would say top-part analysis is still still less dense data, right? It would be typical the denseness. I can compare that with a CR question, critical reasoning question. Critical reasoning, still there is a data, still there is a paragraph which you need to analyze, right? Before you get into the answer options. Same thing here there will be a data which won't be more than 1 paragraph. Okay, maximum maybe a small, 1 big paragraph, a small extra paragraph could be given, right? So data still will not be too much heavy here. Okay, but yes, these 2 question types you try to target to solve under 2 minutes, particularly data sufficiency under 90 seconds, and 2-part analysis like you do for your CR questions under 100 seconds or somewhere around, let's say 110 seconds or less than 2 minutes, right? You have to invest time in other question types like graphical interpretation, table analysis, and multi-source reasoning, right? For that, you need to ensure you are spending lesser amount of time in the first 2 question types. Okay, now you see the majority of the junk is going to be these 2 question types. Roughly about 50% of your questions easily going to be from these 2 question types. I can guarantee you that. Okay, 50% of the question from these 2 question types, right? When I'm saying 50%, that means 10 questions already from these question types. Now, if you are very good at your quant and your basic logical CR skills, this is already sorted. Okay, this is already sorted for you. If you are already prepared for your quant and verbal section, then you are sorted here, because whatever you have prepared for quant and verbal, pretty much data sufficiency and 2-part analysis is going to test you that, right? Particularly those who are prepared for GMAT, anybody asking, right, okay, is it data insights got harder? You see how you look at it, what makes it harder. This 2 question types is going to be the game changer. If you already are good at quant and verbal section, I never paid attention to IR in my whole GMAT. Now, will I be able to crack? You should be able to, because it's going to take 50% of your questions. If you are good at your quant and verbal, you should be good at, in data insights, at least 50% of the, section you already have covered it. Okay. Now, graphical interpretation, table analysis. Again, graphical interpretation, I agree, some part of, graphical knowledge you need to have. You need to understand how a pie chart, what a pie chart looks like, how a line graph, how the X and Y, axis relates. There might be more than 2 data points also. That is, let's say, maybe a scatter plot may have 2 Y-axis and 1 X-axis, 2, dependent two dependent things with 1 independent X-axis. There could be multiple data, could be, and you may be prepared to see a, surprise graph also. When I'm saying surprise graph, there are 2 ways GMAT defines the graphical interpretation data. One is called as a qualitative data, one is called as a quantitative data. So qualitative data, what is qualitative data? Qualitative data has not much to do with the numbers, rather to do with more, the logical point of it, right? When I'm saying logical part of it, maybe it's a flow chart, right? A flow chart, how a hierarchy in a particular organization work, right? A hierarchy of all the, all the managers, senior managers to the employees, to the, the last, the new fresher, the basic level employee, right? How the hierarchy works. That could be a simple flowchart of it. Okay, that's what qualitative data. When I'm saying quantitative data, it's about, let's say, timelines. Let's say, in X-axis they may define timelines from 2000 to 2020. This is the trend of particular company stocks, right? It could be a line graph. So that's what a qualitative data. For a qualitative data, number skill is very, very important. I mean, for a quantitative data, number skill is very, very important. So, you maybe here have to do a lot of estimations. One of the skills, Devmitra will be teaching in your quant section is the estimation skills, right? So you have to learn the estimation skills and, ballparking skills to do it, smartly in these kind of questions, because it's not about doing it all the steps. It's about how quickly you ballpark the data and get to an answer. Okay. So qualitative data, like I said, it's about more logically you interpret the given information, right? Mostly it will be text-based data where you have to interpret it. Okay. And particularly graphical interpretation, it is like similar to your fill in the blanks. You may see a fill in the blanks where a drop down, you have to click on the drop down to see the answer option. Like I said, each and every question type is unique. It's not that all the question type will have 5 answer choices. Okay. All the different, all the 5 different question types are on its own unique. Okay, how the question is going to be tested is going to be very, very unique. Okay, in verbal, you see all of them have 5 answer choices. In quant, all of them 5 answer choices. That's not the same with the data insights. Okay, now table analysis, again, I'm pretty sure when you see the term itself, table analysis, you understand what you are going to see here. You're going to see tables. You may have 5 columns to the max, 5 or 6 columns to the rows, easily about 20 or 15 to 20 data points, right? And what is the best part? They know there is a data heavy. I'm going to give you a table which has a very heavy data. So what they do, they allow you to sort. Okay. So there is an option for you to pick a column which you want to sort. Now, why arrangement of data, right? Sorting, putting in order, right? Arranging specific order. Perfect. Now, why a data has to be, right? Data has to be provided. Then they also allow you to sort. Then you can expect a question like, what is the maximum? Who is the third highest? What is the third highest value? Second lowest value? What is the mean? What is the median? What is the mode? These type of questions you can easily expect in this particular question type. Okay, so that means you need to be good at your statistical skills, right? So whatever you learn in your quant section under stats, right, is going to be very helpful for you to deal with this. Of course, again, you have to have a good understanding of how to ballpark a data. Okay. Now, multi-source reasoning is something, everyone, I see some of you also mailed asking like how to deal with multi-source reasoning. You see, sometimes there are certain things you need to accept that this is going to be harder. Say for an example, right? You see, multi-source reasoning is something like, no. Okay. So I'll give you a different example probably, right? See, for those who said no. So, but quickly, right? Those who can relate with cricket. You see, if you know, let's say if you are playing Rashid Khan, right? Rashid Khan is fairly a tough bowler, right? Fairly a tough bowler when compared to any other spin bowler when it comes to a shorter format. Now, if anyone has to deal with him, how they deal with it? They don't really go for a rash shot when they are playing against Rashid Khan. What they do, they play him sensibly, right? So that's what the approach has to be when it comes to multi-source reasoning as well. And for those who don't follow cricket, think about it like this, okay? right, right, if you are right, if you are given a, if you are given a, let's say you want, if you are given a picture about a cat, and they ask you to observe the details, it's very easy because cat is a tiniest creature, right? You can quickly observe. But if it about, I give you information which is on par with the size of an elephant. Let's say I'm going to give you an elephant and then ask you to observe it and give me your observation. That's going to take some time, right? So that's what the multi-source reasoning brings to the plate, right? So multi-source reasoning is going to have multiple data. Of course, given 1 hour, I can do a lot of things with it. I can crack it in, I can crack it in 1 hour, 30 minutes, all of it. But the challenge is you have to do it with a lesser amount of time. How much lesser? It depends on what the data is provided. So what's best to do it? When I am provided with larger data, I do not want to take it upfront. Okay. So if I want to observe this data, okay, still it's going to be maximum 3 questions, right? Why do I spend at the beginning itself? You say third question MSR, right? There is a lot of data. You may have multiple tabs, excuse me there, right? So you may have multiple tabs. Each tab you have to go through to understand the data. What you try to do, you mark and come back towards the end and deal with it. That's where I think Arun also has mentioned it, right? One of the biggest, as far as the team VC is, one of the biggest application of Bookmark comes under data insights, because GMAT itself, they know that some questions are going to take revisit, right? You have to do a second you have to do a second visit there to have a complete crack at it. So bookmark button comes into a picture, right? More effective when you are using a data, and when you are using it in a data insight section, particularly for MSR. Okay, so my suggestion is, if you are looking at a score of, let's say, 90 percentile or above, I talk about the scores little later. If you are looking at a 90 percentile or above in a IR section, right, the best bet is target data sufficiency, 2-part analysis, do your best, get all of them right, give your best shot there, right? Graphical interpretation, table analysis, relatively easier when compared to multi-source reasoning. Multi-source reasoning, keep it towards the end. Doesn't mean that you completely ignore it. You keep a good amount of, let's say, last 10 minutes for MSR. Okay, 10 minutes, even if you have, let's say, about 8 minutes, still will be fine, because like I told you, to comprehend an RC passage, somewhere between 6 to 8 minutes you require, right? So you keep somewhere around 8 minutes to tackle this MSR towards the end. Even if you get 2 or 1 of them right, still you are going to have a good score. Okay, so don't target to get all of them right. It is again, you think about doing everything right and you don't get most of them right. That should not be the case, right? You should do your best, be smart, and ensure you know which is your strength, which is your weakness, and ensure you target your strength with your best, and weakness, what best you could do, you try to do it. Okay, MSR, nobody going to say, again, I can tell you that MSR, nobody going to say, even if your person is very good at reading comprehension, still not going to say that MSR is my strength. Definitely not, because interpreting data, how good you are at, how good you are doing, how good you are analyzing the data, still you are not going to say that it's going to be the my strength, because it's going to take time to analyze that. Even little bit, comparatively, when you are thinking about other question types, you're going to take that little more time, right? So that's what the strategy I would definitely recommend as far as this question types data insight section is concerned, right? As you could see on the screen already, skills required, what are the concepts you learned in the quant and verbal sense. That's the very reason why you see first, Nita took you through the, verbal section, then quant section, then I am taking you through data insight. The main reason is you need to know what is tested in quant and verbal. Okay, reading and interpretation of large data, that's what the worst expectation here, right? Right. Quick time check, it is 20 minutes. We have to, yeah, sure. Right. So let me quickly go through one aspect of how you quickly, interpret the data, right? If I am talking about interpreting the data, I want you to quickly see how you find the average of these 5 numbers. I just want to quickly take a look at it. How you find the average of these 5 numbers. Quickly find the answer and let me know. Now you see one of the, like, how do you find the average? I'm pretty sure everyone knows how to find the average, right? What is the way to find the average? Sum divided by number of elements. First plus last divided by 2. Oh, okay. Sum divided by number of elements. First plus last divided by 2 in a specific scenario, right? Gover have said that only in a specific case that work, not in every list of numbers, sum of the values divided by the number of items. So this formula is of course there. But if I add these, I have still given 3-digit number. You may expect a 4-digit number, 5-digit number also, right? But how do you quickly do analyze this data and find an average? I want you to pick and assume. I just want you to assume an average, not solve and find the average. I want you to assume an average here. 250. Perfect. I'm going to assume this as my average, and I'm going to see each and every number how it is deviated from 250. That is, on an average, I'm assuming that each and every number is 250. That means that 247 is 3 less than that. Since it is 3 less, I'm going to use a negative. This is almost same, so there is no deviation. I'm going to put 0. This is 7 less than that, right? 243 is 7 less than the assumed average, 250. 6 is 6, 256 is 6 more than the assumed average, and 259 is 9 more than the assumed average. Now, this is the values, right? Differences as far as whatever the assumed average I have taken. This is the differences when compared to the assumed average. Now, if I sum all of this, the final value would be 15 minus 10, which is going to be 5. This is the final total difference, right? Total difference from the actual average, whatever I have assumed. This is the difference in the total. Total divided by the number of elements is the average. So 5 divided by the number of elements here is 5. 5 by 5, which is equivalent to 1. So that is whatever you have assumed, right? It has to be 1 more than that. So your assumed average is 251. Absolutely, Ahmed, perfect, right? Your assumed average is 251. So this is what mostly I am going to be focusing on in the data insight section, the strategy for you to compare the data, right? Here, of course, you add 247, 250, 253, 256, all of it, you can do it. And there is one good news about data insight section, which is not good news. I may say good as well as the bad news, but there is one good news about a data insight section, which is not there in Quant and Verbal. Anybody knows it? One feature is there in a data insight section, which is not there in Quant and Verbal. Feature which could be, some people think that calculator, very good, perfect, right? There is an on-screen calculator which is not there in Quant and Verbal section, and which is there in data insights. Of course, GMAT is tempting you to use a calculator, but remember, calculator using it may not be a wise decision, because the data, it can display maximum 8 or 9 digits, and it's a very basic calculator. And if you start typing 8 digits and adding it or dividing it or multiplying it, you are going to take a lot of time than you do ballparking, right? So you need to develop that skills as well. Calculator could be tricky part there. Okay, so quickly jumping on, right, the scoring part. I only want you to quickly look at one point here, right? Okay, if I could highlight here, I'm just going to drag this. As you could see, one thing I want to highlight here is, you see anything above 81 in a data insight section is more than 90 percentile. Okay, your data insight section, as far as the scoring is concerned, it significantly drops, the percentile drops only if you go below 75. Even 1 point will significantly here it drops. But when you look at the top is not that much crowded, okay, when compared to the Quant and Verbal section. So what does it mean? It is not that you have to attain a 100 percentile here to have a good score, right? Let's say 725, 735 in the overall, right? So you need to only target, like I told you, about out of 20 questions, target around 16 to 17 questions to get it right? You can get fall under this top 10 percentile rank. So anything above 80 sounds a very good percentile. In fact, not this 79 is not still a bad number, but as you go down, it significantly drops. Each and every point significantly drops. So you need to be above average for sure, but of course, right, you need not get everything right to be at the 100th percentile or 99th percentile. As you could see, 99th percentile, 85 still gets a 99th percentile, right? 85 score of 85 still get you a 99th percentile. With that, I'm going to let Dipankar take over, right?
So by this time, all of you who had this question that what should be a good score and how do I figure out according to the new scoring pattern what is a good score for me. So with the insights that you got for Quants and Verbal, I think you got some idea that how to calculate that. Others who are not yet be sure about it, I think you can ask the same question, that how does the university figure that out? What is a good score, right? So the answer would be to take a look at percentiles. So given that there is a school for every score in this world, how do I really compare what is a good score? So I'll just do a comparison with the previous score category, desired categories, right? Like if we look at a 90 percentile or above, we are talking about somewhere in this range, starting from a 700 or 710 in the old score, which is now equating to 650 or 60 or 650 plus, right? So anything above this is an excellent score. However, I would say that even a 650, which is equating to a modern 595 or a 71 percentile, that's also a respectful score. So that is something that we can easily figure out. So I don't think there is any pressure around them. So the question should be more about how do I get this score? So this is where we discuss something called an enhanced score report. For those you have not heard about it, enhanced score report is a report that one can purchase after the GMAT. But that is only for the older GMAT format. Now, as Arun had pointed this out, that the new GMAT Focus, it is trying to get us to the real world scenario and trying to make it, more practically oriented. Thus, information is very important, and that's why they chose to make the information free now. The enhanced score report is free. Also, why would I like to get a score report after the examination? I hope none of you have to. But what we can do is if we can learn from experience, if not my experience, if not my personal experience, you can learn from somebody else's experiences. So that is something that we are also doing. That helps us reverse engineer things better. We have been always doing that by reverse engineering questions and working with ASRs. And how you might have felt that attempting a question in the pressure scenario of time is a completely different experience, whereas attempting it in the exam, in just an analysis phase can be completely different. For example, if I look at a screen like this, a 695, the modern day score, it's a brilliant score. It's the GMAT Focus score is a brilliant score. It's almost as good as a 750 on the new GMAT Focus. So it's created by 100 percentile. That's as much as a Quant 51 or a V36. So I might think about is it okay to get a relative lower score in verbal, or how does the various sections interact? I have to develop strategies about that. I might also think about how this student has actually might have improved this to a higher V36, right? So it's a little subjective, and that's how an insight into the various ways a student is performing in the examination that really helps a lot. So I'm going to talk about just very quickly about a couple of more slides where we can understand what kind of data is offered with the help of ASR and how it helps you. You can actually take a look into the critical reasoning and reading comprehension performance. For example, if I take a look at the verbal part, what kind of score did you have in the critical reasoning? What kind of reading comprehension score did you have? Thus, you can learn where your weaknesses exist. Even in the critical reasoning part, there are various ways in which the questions are tested. They're asking you to find out the structure, the relationship in the argument in the various sentences, or they're asking you to analyze the information. How are they reasoned with each other? Maybe there is a cause and effect and all of that. So that's how you can actually go to the depth and figure out what is the very specific area that we really need to work on. Right? There's more information that they are providing in terms of time now. Now this is quite an improvement. Now they are giving very specific question-wise timing, and you actually get to know this. You can actually view this in a different way also. You can see each question, what is the time that you're consuming in it. Gives you a very good idea, how can I imagine an 800 scorer performs in the test conditions. What kind of time does it, in a practice, it might be very easy to perform a question, but is it equally performed in a test condition also? That's something that you would be curious about, and that's something I am also curious about, and that's why I would like to see all of this information, and it's really helpful in understanding this. So I would like to address the fact that there are many questions at this point, and in fact, not just the questions in the Q&A and the chat, there have been questions which have been waiting for a week that Arun have received. So Arun, I would like you to kindly take over and help us.
I hope we were able to kind of go through a broad range of questions today. So one question that has come is, can old OG books be used for prep? The answer is yes and not and no. Okay, so there is a yes and no answer to it. So the yes answer to it is fundamentally what has not changed is verbal. So whether it be CR or the RC passages, that is not going to change. So you can definitely use OG for that. If you look at Quant, again, as we discussed, there is this slight change in the flavor of Quant. So there is some that we can use, but the interesting thing would be data insights. Now, data insights, logic would tell me I can pick data sufficiency from the earlier version of Quant and I'll pick integrated reasoning. But as you would have realized, based on what Junaid said, we are seeing non-Quant, this logic-based verbal, right, kind of things. So for that, the practice material is something that is still evolving.
One thing what I can add is, right, you have the 2023 edition, OG books also. Okay. So it is not that you have to use the old, GMAT OG books to prepare. The new edition 2023 is there. But like what Arun mentioned, like, OG data sufficiency question in the whatever there in the OG, the data sufficiency question still not really the, the verbal data sufficiency question they have included it. What it tells, they are also still experimenting it. Okay. So, but one thing I can surely tell you is, whatever the concepts you have learned in Quant and verbal is what going to be tested in data sufficiency. So your CR skill is going to be tested there, right? So one thing you can infer from the current OG edition is what you should not prepare for GMAT OG data sufficiency, right? I mean, data insights, data sufficiency. You see, when you look at the OG 2023 edition, it would have, they would have removed all the math type questions from it. So it tells you that you don't prepare data sufficiency, only thinking about math skills.
There is this question that has come. I know you guys have covered the 3 sections in detail, but someone who has been preparing for the classic GMAT can appear for the GMAT Focus just by additionally covering GMAT data insight section, or would you suggest doing something more? The answer to that is largely the skills would be the same, but yes, you need to change 2 things. See, one is data insights as a section. What you also need to understand is the way in which you are going to be approaching the 3 sections. When do you take the break? How do you strategize the time available? Now that you don't have SC, how do you tackle verbal, right? All of these are questions that are going to come. So I would say, yes, there is definitely an advantage if you have been preparing for the GMAT, but I would still, ask you to look at GMAT Focus with a fresh pair of eyes. But in essence, yes, the data insights is the one new section that has gotten added. Someone who's practiced the old format and have 1 month to an exam, shall that person take chance with the new format? I'm going to stick, Suyansh, I'm going to stick my neck out and, make this thing. The earlier test, we have 25 years of data to back it up, correct? Which means that a lot of strategies and a lot of questions is out there, and we have more context ammo to kind of attack it. But with the new test, you're going to have lesser official questions, scores. The percentiles are still evolving as we speak, so there is some amount of uncertainty. So if all things being equal, you already have been preparing, my suggestion is go ahead, take the existing GMAT format, especially if you're applying in R2, because the scores will be relevant next year as well, correct? So Pooja had this question. So a lot of what we are discussing is also based on the experience of the GMAT Focus, right? So this is something that we are also, as tutors, we are also exposing ourselves to the test and trying to see what it's throwing at. Of course, we can't now tell what questions we saw because that goes against the NDA that we signed with GMAT at the time of the test, right? I have taken the first mock and plan to take the exam in December. Should I take the focused edition or the classic edition? My take is December is just 2 weeks away, right? So if your first mock is, you have done well with the existing version, my suggestion is go ahead, take the GMAT in December, apply in R2, get it done with. Correct? Don't consider the GMAT Focus if you have already started preparing for the existing one. The GMAT Focus can serve as a good backup plan. Let us say that plans don't go according to the way you have thought of it, and then you say, okay, well, what do I do now? Great, you have been preparing for the earlier version. All that you have to do, remove sentence correction, remove geometry, include little bit of this data insights bit, right? So I think that's what I would suggest. Remember that existing GMAT is valid only till January 22nd or 25th, right? So around end of January. So you can't take the test beyond that time, right? So keep that in mind. Hriday had this question, which is, should I take the test from home or not? See, here is my take at this point, right? Which is, all things being equal, couple of data points. One is we did get some B schools not accepting online GMAT in India, right? So you had IIM Bangalore doing that. So some Indian schools had a reservation against the online GMAT. If you want to be absolutely sure, take the GMAT in the test center, right? You can be sure that absolutely is not a problem. But I also want you to consider what is your personal choice. Sometimes, you need to go travel, sometimes it's are not available. Whereas if you take the online version, you will be able to find the dates a lot faster, correct? So that's definitely one of the things.
There are pros and cons to everything. It depends a lot of the kind of person you are also in terms of test taking. If you don't want to travel too much to a different place, everything will be different in a test center base. So the simulation is only going to be so much on the screen as a screen-based test on the mocks. So if that can throw you off, maybe online taking the test at home could be a better option. But then you have to organize the test yourself in the best way possible so that you make the most out of the attempt. So if you're confident on that part, then online test could work for you.
And to a certain extent, it also depends on the person that you are. If you're somebody who feels, look, I'm comfortable at home and I feel less stress when I'm here, maybe taking it online is for you. But if you're someone who feels, look, when I'm out there and I feel more charged, then maybe going to the center is up to you. So to a large extent, it's also about understanding who you are and under what circumstances you perform the best.
Does Crackverbal include concepts in the GMAT prep? Absolutely. So see, whatever you are hearing from us is what you will see in the course, right? So this is the expertise we are bringing. We are not expecting you to figure out GMAT Focus. That is our job. So what we are saying is, look, this is what we have figured out, and we are still interpreting as we go. But whatever we can figure out as strategies, what work for students, all of it, our job is to distill and give it to you, right? So we will be, so you know how to get in touch with us. So please, in case you have not enrolled, let me know. In case you are our students, great, don't worry. Even if you have enrolled in the GMAT batch, right, we have something coming up for you so that you can make the migration to GMAT Focus. There is a question on how long the prep should be. If you really approach it smartly, 2 to 3 months is enough, right? You are just trying to make yourself nimble. Your mind needs to know how to work with words and data. There is really not much that can happen that you need to study for, let's say 6 months, 1 year, 2 to 3 months, more than enough. Does timing affect marking in GMAT? The answer is no. Okay, so if you are able to solve the questions, that's what they are not going to come and say, okay, he's ordered 30. Excuse me, 30 seconds, so I'm going to give him extra points.
Okay, so I have prepared for GMAT. I'm good at SC and geometry. I personally don't like topics such as MSR. Should I take GMAT instead of GMAT Focus in few weeks? Is there any disadvantage in admission proper later as score valid for 5 weeks? See, I think already Arun answered this, right? If you have already prepared for GMAT, your best bet is writing the current GMAT format. Okay. So, unnecessarily you are trying to complicate things just because only one question type MSR I am not good at, right? So I will take the new GMAT Focus. No, that should not be the case. MSR, I have already told you some strategy, right? MSR is not the only question type which is going to define your data insight section. You can still get a good score without tackling, right, MSR, without even getting all of them right. Okay. And to extend geometry again, you go through the concepts. What in Crackverbal we provide. Of course, the concepts is basic concepts is what you need to know. It's not that any high level trigonometry is tested there. So just know the basic concept, man, right? As long as you understand the basic concept, geometry should be crackable. Again, geometry is not going to be the higher weightage. Roughly, you can expect around 3 to 4 questions, right? So, I would still, if I were you, I will still wait for. I will still go for the GMAT exam, right? Current GMAT version than GMAT Focus.
One question that a lot of students are also asking is with regards to how B schools will perceive. In fact, there are a few students who have asked that the GMAT is valid for 5 years or is it valuable in, let's say, 2025, correct? So I'm going to take that, but before that, a student had asked about the update. So right now, as we speak, as you know, the test got released on November 7th. So we wanted to wait for what the GMAT is really, what are the kind of patterns, get more insights before we start updating the data insights part. So please hold on. The updated course is going to come up pretty soon. But to answer this question, see, I'll tell you what is going to happen. 2026, what percentage of the applicant pool will have taken the older GMAT? Think about it. 5%. So now when everybody is 635 and 595, 5%. So the number of people applying would not be so much. So it's going to be very hard for them to compare. So I'll be very honest. The old GMAT scores may be used next year, maybe the year after, but I don't see it, extending all the way to up to 5 years, which is the validity time. Because from a B school perspective, it becomes very hard to compare your scores with what the majority would bring into the class. If you are a student, please make sure that you reach out to the team, the details, the way to contact them. In case you are looking at a GMAT focus course, please do let us know. We can have a conversation to see how we can plan your journey better.